And we come to the next item of business, which is questions to the First Minister. Question number 1 from Ian Gray.
To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Engagements to take forward the Government's programme for Scotland.
Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, last week's blizzards obscured the news that our schools have 800 fewer teachers now than a year ago. Indeed, Alex Salmond has now cut 3,000 teachers from our schools in 3 years. How many more does he plan to cut?
First Minister.
Well, if I could persuade Labour councils like Glasgow to put the same priority on teachers as other councils around the country, then of course we can maintain the excellent record of pupil-teacher ratios across Scotland. I would have thought that the context that Ian Gray would be prepared to welcome, that in a situation of dramatic cuts coming to Scotland from Westminster, started by Labour, continued by the Tories and condemned coalition, the fact that we have managed to secure a settlement for local government much better than anybody was predicting, much better than Ian Gray was forecasting, except for Labour councils who might not want to implement it, should be a matter of satisfaction, and it means that education can be protected far more in the face of Westminster-driven cuts.
Ian Gray.
Let's look at what SNP councils are doing under this deal. Say Renfrew. This leaked council briefing note contains a cunning plan from Renfrew to cut another 60 teaching posts. They've already cut 240. What's the plan? A revised operating model in which part of the pupil school week is delivered in primary schools by non-teaching staff. Councillors were told classes could be covered by community education workers, or get this, even volunteers. Does the First Minister support this SNP plan to replace teachers with volunteers?
First Minister.
Well, what I do know, of course, is that I learned to beware of Ian Gray citing documents because there are so many mistakes and misapprehensions in them. But I also have some definite news from Renfrewshire Council that Renfrewshire Council have managed to reduce and get to the class size target from 8.3% to 33.1% this year in securing the class size target of 18 pupils or less, or primaries 1 to 3. Now, even Ian Gray and the serried ranks of the Labour benches should be prepared to admit that that is a significantly good performance in the face of a difficult position. And as far as across the country is concerned, I now find that in terms of the loss of teachers across Scotland, 2/3 of the reduction occurred in Labour councils. And as we know, 2/3, and as we know, there isn't all that many Labour-controlled councils left in Scotland. But they still managed to reduce 2/3 of the total teacher reduction in Scotland. I think it's time Ian Gray got a handle on some of his local councils.
Ian Gray.
Presiding Officer, I think it's time Alex Salmond got a handle on what was happening in his council, because I admit I couldn't believe that they were really suggesting that they replace teachers with volunteers for part of the school week. So I checked it, and I was told that, yes, the Director of Education had said that he thinks that having non-teachers teaching classes is what Curriculum for Excellence is all about. Meanwhile, well, not just Renfrew, in SNP Dundee, they've cut £4 million from schools. But we've not to worry, because Education convener Liz Fordyce actually says this is going to make the schools better. Why didn't she cut £8 million and make them absolutely fantastic? Is this really SNP school policy? Cuts are good for our schools and children don't really need teachers.
First Minister.
As gently as I can, maybe I could just remind Ian Gray that Alistair Darling, when Chancellor, was promising Scotland cuts which were deeper and tougher than those of Margaret Thatcher. 2/3 of the cuts being imposed upon Scotland were generated by the Labour government at Westminster. Now let's talk about Dundee. I mentioned the success of Renfrewshire in increasing the number of classes and class sizes 18 or less. I should, in fairness, have also mentioned Dundee, which has gone from 6.5% to 27.2% this year. And furthermore, because it's the employment of post-probationers that has concerned so many of us in this Parliament, so many councils across Scotland wanting to do better. So what I do also notice is that Dundee have led the way in employing 68% of its post-probationers this year, 41 out of 60, closely followed by SNP-led Fife at 66%. If only all councils were doing that. Midlothian, Labour-controlled, employing just 29% of their post-probationers. Clackmannanshire, 33%. And Glasgow, Scotland's largest council, with the principal responsibility for the decline in teacher numbers, merely 42% of their post-probationers. So if we all agree that the employment of teachers is a priority, let's prevail upon these recalcitrant Labour councils to join the rest of us and employ the teachers.
Even the First Minister's silly pantomime voices cannot hide the fact,
Order.
that for the first time in 40 years in an SNP council,
Order.
he is proposing to have pupils taught by those who are not qualified to teach. That didn't happen even under Margaret Thatcher, but it's happening under Alex Salmond. And maybe I could gently remind him that he promised parents they'd have the same number of teachers they had under Labour. He promised teachers they'd have the same number of jobs they had under Labour. And he promised pupils they would have the new schools they had under Labour. He has let them all down.
Order.
He has let them all down. Isn't his legacy on education failure?
First Minister.
Luckily, we haven't delivered the number of new schools which are promised by Labour, because Labour promised in their manifesto 250 and we've delivered 330. And I'm sure the people of Scotland wouldn't want our ambition restricted to the levels of the Labour Party. And as Ian Gray was moving into the pantomime routine, I could hear us saying, "Oh no, we don't want to do." I remember his leader tried that in Parliament yesterday and was told to look behind him, which would be good advice for Ian Gray. But well, that's what happens. That's what happens to Labour leaders in Scotland. That's why Ian Gray's in post. But I can see that he's taken preventative action, because Scotland on Sunday, Kenny Farquharson, a reliable commentator, revealed to us perhaps the most recognisable figure of the Labour front bench is Auntie Kerr, the former finance minister. But the gossip at Holyrood is he may be soon heading for the back benches. Rather than looking behind him, Ian Gray is taking preventative action to save his position.